Yo, I'm Brendan. Everyone starts their investing journey as a beginner, so the mistakes I'm outlining today are super common. But we all want to start wisely. We all want to grow our money as fast as humanly possible. To do that, we have to avoid two different categories of trust traps, I'm going to call them. The first category is watching out for the kind of jerks that prey on investing beginners and lead us astray. The second category of trust traps is to watch out for unnecessary exposure to risk. So today I'll outline the 7 mistakes that beginners make when investing in troubled times to show you those trust traps in detail. Let's go. Number 1 out of 7 is all about fixing income problems. This is something that we've all experienced lately because inflation has gone absolutely crazy lately. It peaked in June of 2022 at a whopping 9%. Look at this chart. That is absolutely nuts. Before that, it was pretty common to expect like 2% inflation. I mean, we were really spoiled for a while. And then because it peaked and it had this rapid expansion that we're still experiencing today, look, it's higher than it used to be. That means everything is harder to afford. That makes all of us feel poor compared to where we were 5 or 10 years ago. But a problem I see beginners making is they plan to invest money in the stock market to help pay the bills. And that's really not an investing issue. That's an income problem. Even if you have an incredible dividend portfolio that's paying you 10% dividends, it's not really going to help that much. Let's say you scrape together $1,000 in cash and you invest it in that portfolio that's giving you 10% dividends. That means every month you're going to get like $9. Who cares? It's not going to help you that much. $9 doesn't really move the needle for us. You'd be better off keeping that $1,000. Investing should be more of a long-term play than fixing an income problem that we have right now. Trust trap number 2 is failing the finish line. This is what it means whenever we don't have an end goal. We don't have something that we can optimize for. So we kind of blindly look at our investing as, I just want to make more money. I want to have more money. I want to be richer. Well, what is this money for? This money that you're trying to invest and grow and turn into something, I feel the same way. I mean, I want to make my money grow and turn into something bigger. But what's our goal with it? Are we buying a house in 8 years or are we retiring in 28 years? Where is the finish line? And if we determine where the finish line is, we can determine the best route we take to get there. This can shape what we're investing in. This can shape the kind of account we choose to invest, especially. We need to be able to access this money when we plan to access it, and we don't want to get hit with all kinds of taxes and penalties in the meantime. I'm sort of a runner. I've been running for like 4 or 5 years now, trying to do longer and longer distances. I've got an ultra coming up in 16 days. I'm not ready for this ultra. It's a 32-mile race that goes from Lake Pleasant here north of Phoenix all the way up to this mountain town called Crown King. I'm going to get wrecked. I can't afford to set out at a sprint when I'm running this 32-mile race. I've got to start really slow, 12-minute mile, 13-minute mile. I've got to survive this thing. Survival is actually my biggest priority, not speed. But if I was running a 5K, I'd have a completely different perspective, a completely different approach to this. So we've got to establish our finish line. Along a similar line, a common trust trap we have is thinking that if we can benefit enough in the short term, that we'll win in the long term. This is like focusing on the first couple feet in front of you and not looking at anything else down the road. It'd be like if I was running and instead of seeing this view where you can see what's around you, I can see a hole coming up or a rock or a tree root or something. Instead of that, it's only being able to see this. It's terrifying, right? You can't see enough to make a decision. Whenever we focus on this little view just immediately in front of us, like the next week or the next month, we're not able to make as good of decisions as if we have a longer term view. A lot of people are so worried about what's happening today with their investments in the stock market. They're trying to buy and sell today. Oh my gosh, it went up 3%. I'd better buy more. Oh no, it went down 5%. I better sell. This is a good way to make sure that you lose money. If you're running on a trail, it's a good way to make sure that you trip and fall. It's a little different on a trail because you do want to look down and make sure you're not tripping, but you can't just look at your feet while you run. That's not going to work either. Trust trap number 4 is related to trusting the wrong people. These are the kind of people that lead astray beginners. These are people that have an ulterior financial motive besides your ultimate success. And there's multiple different categories of these kinds of people. The first type is the money guru, the Jim Cramers of the world, the whole life insurance salesman, the guy who claims that he has all the information that you need and all you have to do is follow him and you'll win. For one thing, if the guru is really a guru, then he needs to have already won at this game. He needs to be so good at this that he's filthy rich because he has all the answers. If he hasn't deployed his own answers to affect his own life positively, he's not a real guru. He's a liar or he's a charlatan. The second type of wrong expert sometimes people listen to are negative Nancys. These are the kind of guys that say, we're all screwed, So buy gold ammo in a bunker. Oh, the stock market's going to crash in 2025, so just get ready. Oh, well, this stock is going to plummet, so make sure and sell it now. The financial world does go in cycles, and things do correct, and things do go back down every now and then. So if these people are negative for long enough, they'll be right every now and then. But it's like a broken clock that's wrong almost all the time, but hey, twice a day it is right. That doesn't justify listening to them. Just because they said, oh yeah, the stock market's going to go down this year for the last 20 years and they were right 2 or 3 times, that doesn't justify their perspective. Negative Nancys need to be avoided. Similarly, a category of these kind of wrong experts that I call snake oil salesmen need to be avoided. Sometimes a guru kind of starts out claiming they're a guru and then they pivot to become a snake oil salesman. These are the kind of guys that say, oh, you've got to join my mastermind and I'll unlock all the secrets of Forex trading, or join my super expensive paid Discord group and I'll reveal to you all my investments and everything will be unlocked for you so you can be as successful as I am. This is where we have to deploy our radar of, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. If they have this simple approach that all you have to do is follow their structure and you're guaranteed some crazy amount of results, that's not going to happen. They're going to get your money. You're going to get some kind of cockamamie plan that doesn't make any sense or doesn't help you or doesn't actually work anymore because maybe it did work 10 years ago, but not now. And you're going to be stuck having spent this money for nothing. For a lot of these guys, you can sniff them out with a single test. And that's, if it seems so good that everybody should be doing it and they're not, then it's probably not as good as it seems. If all you have to do is X, Y, and Z, and then you'll be successful, then everyone would do that. Everyone would be as rich as these guys claim that they are, or that their students would be. But when we're desperate for success, especially when we're starting out as beginners, sometimes we want to listen to these kind of people, and it just makes us into one of their victims. So watch out for the wrong experts. Number 5 is paying someone to do the hard work for you. And at first, this is a fairly reasonable approach. Like, I've talked to a lot of people who initially start out kind of making financial decisions on their own. Then they realize, oh my gosh, this world is so complex and convoluted and scary. And so I'd rather just pay somebody. I have one significant caveat here, and that's if the difference is you're not going to invest at all, you're not going to manage your money at all unless you pay somebody, okay, then it's worth it. If you're just going to literally bow out, I would rather you pay out the nose and be sort of taken advantage of and still be in the game than retire from the game altogether. But by and large, most of us don't need to be paying an expensive expert 1%, 2%, maybe up to 5% fees that are going to ruin our returns just so that they handle the nitty-gritty for us. Most of this offloading of the work of doing the actual trading is not that hard. It's not that complicated. If you spent 3 weeks or 6 months or however long it takes for you to get enough of a basic grasp of what you need to do based on your life, you're going to end up saving yourself thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars over the course of your life. Look at this little chart by this Instagram profile, Personal Finance Club. Jeremy does a great job of breaking down financial concepts into something that's simple and digestible in an Instagram format. I don't really play on Instagram, but if you do, he's worth a follow. So look at the percentage of your returns that you lose to annual fees. Well, the implicit thing here, this is why I'm bringing up the fees. If you're paying someone to manage your money for you, they're probably charging you a 1 or a 2% fee to do it. That means all the money that you have invested with them, all the money that you give them to manage, they're going to take every year probably 1 or 2% of that. And on face value, that seems harmless, but the point of this chart is that it points out it's not harmless. They're taking away tons and tons of your overall returns. So let's say you're paying a 2% fee for 25 years. That means you're going to lose 40% of your investment returns over the course of that time. You would be 40% richer had you not paid this person to manage your money for you. And I know that's so counterintuitive because you're like, wait a minute, if it's just 2% per year, how does that add up to 40% of my overall gains? Shouldn't it just be this tiny little fraction of my overall gains? This is one of those areas of investing math and compound interest and just compounding in general that's really counterintuitive. But we have to trust the math here to go, you're losing out on a lot more than it feels like. And I think that human psychology plays into why these financial advisors and why these investment advisors use this kind of fee is it seems harmless. It seems worthwhile. Hey, all I do is give this guy 2% and he handles everything for me and it's so great. But if you could time travel to 25 years from now and say, oh, I've given him 40% of all of my investment returns, would that really be worth it? Or could you have spent 6 weeks to learn what you need to learn to invest for yourself and keep 40% of your gains? If we're lucky enough to live long enough and invest for 50 years and you're paying somebody 2%, that's 64% of your gains. That's most of the returns you've made your entire life. You've given away to somebody else. I literally can't even imagine. And the tricky thing is that you would never see that. It's not like your investment advisor would go, oh, hey, by the way, I have stolen away 18% of your gains in the last 10 years. They're never going to point that out. They're just going to say, oh, look at the returns I've gotten you. Look, you've made $100,000 in profit. Pat me on the back for doing such a good job for you. Not saying, oh yeah, but I took 20 grand of it. They're not going to do that. So we have to be the ones that pay attention to learn enough to do the trading for ourselves, to learn enough how we need to invest and what kind of account to put it in. It's basic enough that we can do that. For 99% of us, this is not over our heads. You can actually handle this. The world is unpredictable and it is more complicated than ever. And there are more financial products out there than ever. So people think now's the time to rely on some seasoned professional to do the work for me. No, it's not the time. You can do this. The sixth mistake that we make as beginners, the sixth trust trap that we make is just thinking that somehow our gains are going to make up for a lack of investment. We think that, well, all I can really afford right now, all I have in terms of spare cash is $5 per week. So that's what I'm going to invest. And hear me out here. I don't want to dissuade people who are starting slowly or starting with a minimal income from investing. If that's literally all you can afford, you should do it. But just know that it's going to take you 100 years to amass any real amount of money when you're investing $5 per week. Check this out. I did this in an investing calculator. Let's say if you start with $1, you invest for 100 years, you make about an 8% return, which is normal for people, and you're contributing $20 a month. So that's around $5 a week. After 100 years, you'd have $6.8 million, which is totally amazing. I love that. But unless you're like the healthiest person in history and you're going to live to be 150 and you start investing the day you're born, this isn't going to help you. I realize the 100-year timeline is kind of silly. So instead, let's look at a more reasonable timeline that's still really long, a 40-year investment timeline. If you invest $5 per week at the same rate for 40 years, the reason I picked 8% is that's like a common kind of return to expect if you're investing a reasonable way in the stock market to where you're going to get good returns, but you're not going to be like super, super risky. You do this faithfully for 40 years, you only end up with $64,000. $64,000 is going to pay like 1 year of your living expenses by the time 40 years rolls around because inflation is going to make everything more expensive. If you've invested for your whole life and you can live 1 year off the money, that's crazy talk. The corollary to this one is actually that we go and we look for extremely risky stuff because we say, okay, I've got these constraints in life, right? Let's say I'm paid $30,000 a year. And so all I can afford is $5 per week. So the only way I have any shot of actually amassing a real amount of money is investing more, which I can't do because I only get paid this much, or I got to risk it. I've got to find something that's super risky. I've got to buy some kind of crypto future tradings option on margin and bet my whole life away. And if I win, I'm going to win big. But this is also just a huge mistake. Guys, even if we don't have a lot of money to invest, what we've got to do is keep investing in reasonable ways. Because if you invest for a while and let's say you make a big gain at your $5 per week and you turn that into $1,000 in the first year, that's a huge gain. But then if you lose it all the next year, you've started over from nothing. So you've completely wiped out any chance you had of growth because now you're back to zero. One of the most important rules of investing is to not lose money, because then we actually have something to build on and it's going to grow faster and faster. I know how frantic and stressful it can feel to say, if I don't make this happen, if I don't take a big enough risk here, then I don't stand a shot. I've been there. And the progress in the beginning is excruciatingly slow. I actually just quit my job to try and make videos with you full time. And the fact that I'm not making enough money to pay our bills right now is painful. And so I feel that pain now to be like, hey, I can't invest $1 because I have to spend it all. And it's not until my income can go up that I'm able to actually get investing again personally. My wife still invests, but I don't. So I'm literally in the thick of it with you right now. And I feel that pain. But even still, I don't think that's an excuse for us to take such unnecessary risks and be hopeless on our income that we justify the risks. You know, we've got to say, how can I increase my income? That's really the question, because it's not about increasing risk to an unsustainable level. It's about saying, I've got to keep the risk in a reasonable range, not get too crazy, and then shovel as much money in as I possibly can. And the only way to really do that is to increase our income. I've had a couple different friends in the past that are so about optimizing their spending. They're like, I'm going to buy the 99-cent can of beans instead of the $1.29 can of beans because I've got to save money. And it's like, you know, that 30 cents is not the way that we're going to get financially independent. We've got to earn more so we can invest a substantial amount more. We can only optimize down our costs so much. The amount we can optimize up our income is basically limitless. So we've got to shoot for that because that's where the potential is. That's where our possibility of actually moving the needle is. Speaking of fear and uncertainty, something that a lot of people at my age and younger, we are doing right now in a lot of ways, not just in investing, but we're being too afraid to start. This is number 7. Our 7th trust trap is being so afraid to start investing, to dive into this world, that we hold cash instead. My brethren, my millennial and Gen Z brothers and sisters, this is the mistake that I hear a lot of us making. And I get it. It's scary. It's complicated. The stock market is at all-time highs right now at time of filming. A lot of people around us will be like, hey, that's a bad time to invest. Uncle Bill over here says the stock market's too high right now, so I need to wait until it goes down and then I'll invest and then whatever. But is Uncle Bill an investing expert? Is he financially independent? Does he have a $10 million plus net worth or not? Probably not. Check out this chart, another Personal Finance Club Instagram post where he says, look, the stock market is regularly at all-time highs. It's supposed to be at all-time highs. This is the stock market's job. Right now, today, it's no different. Look at all these different time periods from the late 1950s all the way till today when the stock market was at all-time highs and then experienced a big fall, 20%, 15%, 27%, 34%. Like we've experienced some giant drops. And that's really scary when you see your money drop by that much. If you have a significant amount invested and you lose 10, 20, 30 grand in a day, at least on paper losses, you haven't actually lost it, that's terrifying. But then look what it's done over time. If somebody had invested in 1958 down here at this first drop, imagine what they'd have today, because look at how crazy that's gone up. Imagine always avoiding the stock market when it's at an all-time high. Imagine missing out on all of these different times that you can invest and profit. Anybody who's recommending that you avoid investing right now and you hold on to cash instead hasn't seen a chart like this of the stock market. They don't understand how the stock market works if that's what they're recommending to you. So despite the market being at all-time highs, like it regularly is, we've got to pony up some courage. We've got to invest anyway. And then an eighth trust trap, a little bit of a bonus here, is calling things that aren't investments an investment. I hear this all the time. People justify things and they're like, yeah, well, it's an investment. I need this to do something else, so it's an investment. I need to buy this nice ass car to be seen in, so clients think I'm successful, so that then I get more business so that I get successful, right? I've got to buy a depreciating asset that I'm paying interest on, that I'm risking every day as I drive around that might get totaled tomorrow, probably one that I can't really afford, so that people think I'm successful, so I become successful. People think buying whole life insurance is an investment. A, it's flat out not an investment, it's an insurance product. And B, it's not a great product in general. I personally only use term life insurance and it's dirt cheap. And then all my investment money can be truly investments. It can get a reasonable return that's actually going to grow over time and not be weighed down by the goofy structure of whole life insurance. Your primary home is almost never an investment. The value of that is locked up in the walls. Like right now, I'm in my home. I can't live off of the value of my home. If it goes up to being worth $2 million tomorrow, that's great. But unless I sell the place or do some reverse mortgage or something crazy, it doesn't actually help me that much. When people gamble and they jump into speculative crap like Forex, sketchy new crypto coins, anything that's some crazy new financial product that they're being promised that the gains are to the moon on, that's not really an investment. That's a gamble. You may as well go to the casino, put it all in black, and roll the dice and see what happens, because that's not an investment. The literal definition of gamble is to take risky action in the hope of a desired result. And I'm sure there's somebody out there screaming at their keyboard right now being like, what's the difference between that and investing? All you're doing is taking a risky action. You're putting your money into this stock market and you're hoping that it goes up. The difference comes down to the probability of success, because in the past 100 years, if you bet on the entire stock market in general, if you took this risky action on the hope that it goes up, you'd have been right. You'd have made money. You'd have been set. When you look at the statistics of a gamble, like something at a casino, like something like betting on some Forex thing to work out, betting on a new altcoin to work out, the vast majority of them fail. There's a reason why the house wins at a casino. There's a reason why most people don't make money in sketchy altcoins and in Forex and things like that. And speaking of bad investments, I even had a coworker once who would buy these big expensive woodworking tools, like name brand, super snazzy stuff, and call them an investment. He'd go, oh yeah, my bonus is coming next month, so I bought this new table saw. I'm like, dude, that's like a $2,300 tool. Are you sure you need that? Well, it's an investment. An investment for what? He paid this heavy upfront cost to buy a tool to continue his hobby. That's not an investment. It's an enabling, fun thing in life. It's like saying this water bottle is an investment in my life because if I don't drink water, then I'll die. I mean, okay, but at that point, you can justify anything as an investment. As a rule, we need our investments to have a reasonably high probability of going up in value, of benefiting us in some significant, tangible way. And all these other things that people claim are investments that aren't, don't meet that promise. They don't meet that rule. So if you're getting started investing and you need a place to start, you need to go, okay, so I'm going to do the right things. I need the first step. Well, most of us need to download an app to do that. And so this is the best investing apps for beginners this year in case you need to get started right now today. The sooner you do, the better. And this is a very in-depth video, so I tell you exactly what needs to happen in an investing app for it to be useful for us, especially for beginners. And it goes through like a 6-part framework, so you know, does it check all the boxes or not? What are the pros and cons? Pick whichever one is right for you. Get going. All right, thanks. See you guys. Bye.